So in the last lesson, we ended with talking about the typology as designated by Peter Newmark. And he said that there are 3 types of texts. This is how he classified texts. 3 types: expressive, النص التعبيري; vocative, النص الداعي, which means it calls upon the listener or the reader to do something; and the third one is the informative. So how do I translate these 3 types? What do I choose? Communicative approach or semantic approach? So in this lesson, or rather this unit, which consists of 2 lessons, we need to understand how to choose the translation, the best translation method for different text types. Okay, let's begin with expressive texts. Let's see. Now, of course, again, Peter Mark, this is a name that you will hear a lot during this course. Peter Newmark suggests adopting the approach of semantic translation when translating an expressive text. Now, because it is an expressive text, because it expresses something, we have to stick to the feelings and emotions of the source author. We need to transfer those feelings and emotions as they were expressed in the source text. So we need semantic translation, الترجمة الدلالية. In expressive texts, we do that. Whenever the word expressive is said, just remember a novel or a poem. When we translate a poem, we want to convey the same feelings, the same emotions, the same passion, the same images, and the same style. So in semantic translation, the translator should attempt to render as closely as the semantic and syntactic structures, الأبنية النحوية والدلالية, of the second language allow, the exact contextual meaning of the original. Remember, we have done this previously. So we need to transfer the exact contextual meaning of the original text. Why? In order to display the personal components of the text, the identity of the source text, the characters of the source text, and make the translated text follow as close to the original as possible. This is semantic translation, that we make the translated text follow as close as possible the original, because it aims at rendering the exact contextual meaning of the original. However, we use this semantic approach when it comes to expressive texts. Now, let's ask ourselves all the time, if you forget, if you get confused, if you get a question, which approach to use with expressive texts. Remember the word function, please. We choose the approach according to the type of the text, which means the function of the text. So why we choose to approach an expressive text semantically? In order to highlight the expressive function of the text. Remember, please, the word function. This is how we think of texts, function, types. Now, here is an example. I believe a poem is the best example to explain expressive texts. Okay. On the left side, you have the original poem, the original text, and on the right side, you have the translation in Arabic by Dr. Maher Shafiq Farid. And he is an expert translator. Dr. Farid is known to be one of the experts in the field of literary translation, الترجمة الأدبية. Now, this is a very short poem by the English poet Robert Graves. Since now I dare not ask any gift from you, or gentle task, or lover's promise, nor yet refuse whatever I can give, and you dare choose. Have pity on us both, choose well, on this sharp ridge dividing death from hell. Now, the poem, any poem, depends on many things. One of those things is the structure of the sentence, the syntactic structure of the whole poem, what comes before what. So I cannot change that, because this syntactic structure, it is what gives the poem meaning and highlight the feelings in there. So we cannot change actually the order of the lines, or to begin, for example, from the third line instead of the first line. But again, there is a challenge here. It's a challenging task because you know, poetry is one of the most difficult genres to be translated. So I thought that giving you an extreme example would make you always remember that when it comes to expressive texts, we need semantic translation. So since now I dare not ask, ما دمت. Now, this is, of course, one of the things we need to know about language and the culture behind it, because you can translate since as منذ, but you have to understand the whole poem to realize that since here means because. Okay? بما أنني ما دمت لا أجرؤ أن أطلب الآن منك هدية أو مهمة رقيقة أو عهد حب حتى ولا أن أحجب nor yet refuse ما أستطيعه whatever I can give مهما تجاسر اختيارك, and you dare choose. فاشفقي على كلينا, have pity on us both. أحسني اختيار مطلبك, choose well. ونحن فوق حافة مسنونة, on this sharp ridge. ما قالش مثلا حافة حادة، رغم ان شارب هنا ممكن نقول حادة، لكن حافة حادة كلمتين متتاليتين كل كلمة تبدأ بحرف الحاء ثقيلة على اللسان، فقال حافة مسنونة لأنها الحقيقة بتوصل الصورة بشكل أوضح، لأن هذه الحافة المسنونة، الحافة بتفصل دائما بين شيئين، حافة مسنونة تفصل بين الموت death والجحيم hell. ودي الصورة الصادمة في القصيدة كلها، لأن الحافة دي المفروض تفصل بين شيء إيجابي وشيء سلبي، إلا أنها تفصل بين الموت والجحيم. ورغم أن كلمة الجحيم ترتبط في الثقافة العربية الإسلامية بدلالات سلبية، ورغم أننا لسنا معتادين أن نقابل مثل هذه الكلمة الجحيم في قصيدة شعرية، إلا أن المترجم التزم بالصورة الشعرية، فأي تغيير في الصورة الشعرية، أي محاولة لتخفيف المفردات تغير من المعنى الأصلي، لأن هذه قصيدة شعرية. It is an expressive text. So the translator should really try to transfer the feelings and the text there in the text as close as he can through using the Arabic semantic and syntactic structures, because the translator wants to render, to clarify, to transfer the exact contextual meaning of the original text. So this is an example of translating an expressive text through the semantic approach. Now, you might ask, okay, but can we do it through a communicative approach? Well, of course you can, but then it's not going to be the same poem. You will just be telling me what the poet says. You're not rendering a poem in Arabic translation. If you translate this poem using a communicative approach, it's as if you're just giving me a summary of what is in there. But for professional translation, when it comes to all genres of literature, you have to use the semantic approach. So expressive texts, semantic approach. Now, what about vocative texts? Now, the purpose of vocative texts, the target, of course, is the readership. The reader is the target, because actually the status of the author of this text is not important at all. It's not even important to know the name of the author sometimes, because vocative texts, النص الداعي, is calling upon the listener or the reader to do something. So the target is the reader. And what is important is the effect of information. We need the effect of the information in this text. And it is also very important that the reader or the listener gives the correct, effective response. So if it is a warning, تحذير, or prohibition, منع, the reader or the listener should respond correctly to that. This text, the vocative text, is always calling upon the readers to act or to think or to feel, to do something in the way intended by the text. Vocative texts. النص الداعي وغالبا ما بيكون في صيغة أمر imperative. Now, when it comes to translation, what does a translator do? The translator frequently prefers to adopt the approach of explanation rather than reproduction. So, in the poem by Robert Graves, which is an expressive text, the translator, Maher Farid, reproduced the text, the same text in Arabic. But when we are translating vocative texts, we don't have to reproduce. Actually, we want to explain to the reader what we expect him to do. Therefore, the translator has the right to correct or improve the logic of the text, to get rid of clumsy, confusing syntactical structures, and to put elegant ones instead, and to discard any obscurities, just to get rid of any thing that is not clear. So the translator here has the liberty to rework the text in translation, because we care about the information in the text, not the style or the aspects of language or any of these. The translator doesn't have to follow the form of the original. Instead, he or she can rearrange the sentence structures of the text and make the translated text natural, fluent, and easily understood. And again, this is the point of view of Peter Newmark. Well, I think you can understand this. While in expressive texts, we have to stick to the syntactical and semantic structures of the original. In vocative texts, we can even I would say improve the logic and structure of the original, because my focus is the information in this text and the reader's effective response. Now, let's look at examples, okay? Let's look at examples, and this will clarify things. Now, look at the example on the left side. No entry. Now, if we translate semantically, it's going to be لا دخول, and it looks funny. What do we mean by لا دخول? ممنوع الدخول. Okay. So the translator here replaces no with not allowed to. Do not disturb, لا تزعج, but then it's meaningless. ممنوع الإزعاج أو نرجو عدم الإزعاج، أو الحقيقة بقى نرجو الهدوء. Okay. All these will be translations of do not disturb, but definitely not this one, لا تزعج. That's wrong. The poor of the world unite. فقراء العالم. Okay, correct. The poor of the world. فقراء العالم اتحدوا. أو اتحد. So we need to understand the context, السياق. In Arabic, we add ياء النداء. يا فقراء العالم اتحدوا. ياء النداء is not there. It does not exist in English. But then in Arabic, we add this. يا فقراء العالم اتحدوا. But then when you see a sentence like this, فقراء العالم اتحدوا, first of all, you don't have any تشكيل, so you can read it as فقراء العالم اتحدوا. But actually here, this is a command. This is an imperative. This is a request. يا فقراء العالم اتحدوا. So the translator has the liberty to improve the logic, to render a clear translation in Arabic. The last example is unbelievable prices, أسعار لا تصدق, which is okay, which is okay. Actually, you can translate that in many ways. تنزيلات ضخمة, occasion, خصومات. So you have many ways to transfer the information. You want to say that there are very good prices here in this shop. Okay. In the first two examples, this is a request that you're not allowed to use this gate, no entry, and please do not disturb. ممنوع الإزعاج. نرجو عدم الإزعاج أو نرجو الهدوء. So this is what we mean by a vocative text, and as you can see, the approach to the vocative text is the communicative text, the communicative approach. So expressive texts need semantic approach. You cannot change anything. Vocative texts need communicative approach. You want just to communicate the information in the text. Okay, now there remains the third type of texts, the informative texts. And this is going to be lesson 2. We need to look at informative texts and the best approach. We have been speaking about the 3 types of texts as classified by Peter Newmark. Why do we speak about this typology? In order to decide the most convenient and suitable approach of translation to use with each type. The approaches are 2. These are semantic approach and the communicative approach. So far, we have talked about the first 2 categories or types of texts. We talked about expressive texts, and we said that we should use the semantic approach because we cannot change the feelings of the text. And then we talked about vocative text, which is a text that calls upon the reader to do something, to act, to think in a certain way. And we said that we care about the message conveyed by this text, so we can use the communicative approach. Now, in this lesson, we need to talk about the third type, and this is informative texts. What are informative texts, and which approach do we need to use with that? As we have learned, we need to think of the function of this type so that we could decide on the most convenient approach. Informative texts, as their name says, they are texts that inform the reader of something, right? So the focus here is on the information, the core of information in the text. This is what we care about, the information inside. And information could be conveyed in any way. We just care about the clarity of the message. Now, the function of informative texts, according to Newmark, focuses on the external situation, the facts of a specific topic, the reality outside language. That is, there is information that is not related to the aspects of language of the text, as opposed to, for example, the expressive texts. In expressive texts, we need to convey and transfer every aspect of the language. Now, informative texts just tell us about something that is outside the text. It's a piece of information. So the truth conveyed by the information in this text is the core of the type. It's the information. The focus is the information. You just need to transfer the information. Therefore, Peter Newmark suggests adopting the approach of communicative translation. You just need to communicate some information in order to produce the effect to the target readers as close as possible to that obtained by the original readers. The information conveyed to the original readers should be the same information conveyed to the target readers. In which way, it doesn't matter, but the same information must be conveyed. There must be accuracy and truth in the process of information transmission. Because communicative approach doesn't mean you can change the information. You do not change the information. On the contrary, you need to be very accurate when you convey this information, but you just do it in a communicative way, ترجمة توصيلية, because you need to communicate the heart of this information to the target reader. The readers of a translated text should be able to comprehend it, to understand it, to the point that they can conceive how the original reader of the text must have understood and appreciated it. And this is by another translator critic who is called Nida, and we will come across Nida later. But then that you not only transfer the information in a very accurate and truthful way, you also transfer the information. You translate the informative text so that the readers in the target language can conceive, can understand, it can assimilate how the original reader must have understood the text. So the effect should be the same. And this is the criteria of a successful translation of an informative text. Okay, so if it is text, informative text that is warning about something, so the both readers, the original and the reader in the target language, should feel this apprehension, which is the result of a warning. So it should make the reader of the target language understand how the original reader must have understood this text or must have responded to this text. So informative texts, النصوص الإخبارية, you need just to transfer the information as accurate as possible, okay? And you can do that in a communicative way. Here is an example. صدرت عن الحكومة الإسرائيلية تصريحات أمس تعبر عن غضبها إزاء ما أسمته بالتصريحات غير اللائقة التي تصدر عن مصر ضد أريال شارون رئيس الوزراء الإسرائيلي. وذكر راديو لندن أن شارون أصدر بيانا أمس جاء فيه كذا 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 كذا. Now, this is the Arabic translation of an original English text. And of course, as you can see, this is a purely informative text. Okay, here is the English. Statements by the Israeli government yesterday expressed anger over what it called Egyptian inappropriate statements against Ariel Sharon, Israel's prime minister. London Radio said that Sharon made a statement yesterday in which he, and then the rest of the statement. So what you see in blue could be alternatives over what it called or over what it described as Egyptian inappropriate statements, Egyptian inappropriate references to Ariel Sharon. You can say London Radio or according to BBC. Of course, in English, it's clearer to say according to BBC because BBC is well known. So once you say BBC in English, everybody knows what you're talking about. But then when you use Radio London in Arabic, now this is a sign, huh? A sign. This is إشارة في هنا بعد سياسي راديو لندن. Okay, so you communicate this in whatever way you want. If you translate this Arabic part into English, you can do that. And if you do the opposite, then you can do the Arabic version up there. What I want to say is any informative text, and of course all newspapers is what we call informative. So when you translate an article or a khabar, any khabar, this is informative. It's even called khabar. خبر يخبر عن شيء ما. So you just need to think of the best way to communicate this text. And with this, we end understanding the approaches to translation. So now we know, let's wrap up all that we have said. Now we know that we have 3 types of texts according to Peter Newmark, and each type requires a certain approach of translation. So expressive texts require a semantic approach. Vocative and informative texts require the communicative approach. And before deciding on the best approach, we need to do the text typology. We need to understand the text. We need to decide the function of the text. And in this way, we can choose the best approach to translating the text. However, unfortunately, there is always a loss in translation. When we translate, we lose something. We are bound to lose something. And therefore, loss in translation is going to be our topic for the coming lecture. Thank you very much.